All right, welcome back to our second day of our solving proportions lesson. So if you remember from yesterday, all we did was we cross multiplied and divide. So today we're going to add another step where you actually need to write out your proportion first, and then you can go ahead and then you can solve it. So let's take a look at our examples. And these examples are found on the bottom of the notes from yesterday. So I've got three problems here that we're going to solve. We're going to have to set them up, and then we're going to solve them. So let's take a look at number one. Number one, in the United States, 12 out of every 15 people prefer eating at a restaurant over cooking at home. Use the ratio to predict how many people out of 500 would prefer eating at a restaurant. So the biggest thing that we need to do when we're writing our proportion is we need to make sure that it's organized and we have our numbers where they need to be. Now there's a lot of different ways that we can do this, but I like to start off by writing down what it is that I'm actually comparing first, so I make sure that it stays the same. So the two things that I'm comparing is I'm comparing people that like to eat out compared to everybody. So I'm going to write eat out and then everyone. Okay, so those are the two things I'm comparing. Now in my first sentence it actually gives me a ratio. It says 12 out of every 15 people prefer to eat out than cooking at home. So 12 of those people like to eat out of 15 total people that were asked. So I'm going to write it my proportion. Now the next number I have in here is 500 people. So it says use the ratio to predict how many people out of 500. So we need to decide, is there 500 people that like to eat out, or is it 500 total people that we're asking? And we're asking 500 total people. Now I don't know, out of 500, I don't know how many people like to eat out at restaurants instead of cooking at home. So that's going to be my variable. Now that my proportion is set up, I can go ahead and I can cross multiply and I can divide. So I'm going to draw my arrows. And my first one is going to be 15 times x. And then I have 500 times 12. So when we clean our problem up, I end up with 15x equals 6,000. Okay. And I'm going to move this over here so we have a little more room. Okay, draw my line. Now I need to get rid of that 15, so I'm going to divide by 15 on both sides. We know that those 15s cancel out, and I end up with x equals 400 people. So if I ask 500 people if they prefer to eat out at a restaurant or cook at home, 400 of those people are going to say they prefer to eat out. So the biggest thing is setting up our proportion and making sure that it's organized with the two things that I'm comparing. Number two says there's 810 calories in 3 scoops of vanilla ice cream. How many calories are there in 7 scoops of vanilla ice cream? So this time the two things that I'm comparing is calories and scoops of ice cream. And I find that just by looking at the labels. And a lot of times the numbers they give us are right next to each other already, like in this one right here. It says 810 calories in 3 scoops. So I know that in 810 calories of 3 scoops of ice cream. So I'm going to set up my proportion. Now my next number says 7 scoops. So if you take a look on the bottom here, right here, scoops is on the bottom. So that 7 needs to be on the bottom of my proportion. And I'm looking for how many calories there are in 7 scoops. And I don't know that, so that's going to be my variable. So I can go ahead and cross multiply and divide. So here's my cross multiplication. So I like to start with my variable, so I have 3 times x equals 7 times 810. And I'm going to move over a little bit so I have a little more room. 3 times x is 3x. And 7 times 810 is 5,670. So I'm going to draw my line. And I need to get rid of that 3, so I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. And x equals 1,890 calories. So in 7 scoops of vanilla ice cream, there's 1,890 calories. Let's take a look at our last problem. Our last problem, number 3, says the Millers drove 105 miles on 3 gallons of gas. At this rate, how many miles can they drive on 10 gallons of gas? So my two things that I'm comparing, they're right next to each other again. It says 105 miles on 3 gallons. So I'm comparing miles to gallons. Now my first rate is already written for me. I have 105 miles on 3 gallons of gas. So I'm going to set up my proportion. Now my other piece of information, it says 10 gallons. So if I take a look at the two things I'm comparing, we have gallons on the bottom, right? So there's 3 gallons on the bottom. So that 10 needs to stay on the bottom because that's where I'm writing my gallons. And I don't know how many miles that is going to make. So there's my variable. All right, we're going to go ahead and we can cross multiply. I end up with 3 times x equals 10 times 105. I'm going to move over so I have a little more room here. 3 times x is 3x. And 10 times 105 is 1,050. Okay, I'm going to draw my line, and I need to get rid of that 3, so I need to divide by 3 on both sides. Those ones cancel out. And x equals, going to use my calculator again, 350 miles. So on 10 gallons of gas, they can go 350 miles. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that completes our short lesson for today on how to use proportions in word problems. Make sure that you're doing that IXL. Make sure that you're staying organized when you're setting up your proportion. They're really easy to solve. I think the hardest part is making sure that I have all the numbers in the right spot. So if you need any help, hit me up on Schoology, and we can meet, or I can send you some instructions. Talk to you later, guys. Peace.